The night was quiet inside the alien tower. Tall walls of shining crystal touched the sky, and the city lights outside sparkled like stars. Most aliens had already left, their voices gone, leaving only silence. In this silence, one human janitor worked alone, pushing his cleaning cart from hall to hall. His name was Daniel. He wore a simple gray uniform, and his shoes made soft sounds on the polished floor. He kept his head down, never speaking unless asked. Aliens never noticed him, for to them, humans were small and unimportant, just workers for dirty jobs. But Daniel did his work carefully, with quiet pride. He believed every floor deserved to shine, even if no one thanked him. That night, as he swept dust from a wide marble corridor, something strange happened. A faint sound reached his ears, soft and trembling. At first he thought it was the wind, through the high glass windows, but then it came again, a weak cry full of pain. Daniel stopped, heart beating faster. The cry was coming from deeper inside the tower, from a place where he was not supposed to go. He pushed his cart aside and walked slowly toward the sound. Every step echoed, making the empty hall feel alive with mystery. He passed tall doors marked with alien symbols, glowing faint blue in the dim light. Finally, he reached a huge door. Of glass half open, the cry came from inside. Daniel hesitated, then stepped through. What he saw froze him. Inside the vast glass chamber was a child. Not human, but alien. The child lay in a floating chair, weak arms struggling, body twisted, as if broken. Strange machines surrounded the chair, blinking lights, tubes humming softly. The child's skin shimmered faint silver and tears rolled down its cheeks, glowing like tiny crystals in the low gravity. The machines did nothing for those tears. The child's face was wet, lonely, forgotten. Daniel's heart squeezed. He stepped closer, his hands shaking. He pulled a small cloth from his pocket, the same one he used for dusting tables. Gently, he wiped the tears from the child's face. The child blinked, confused, staring at him with wide, glowing eyes. Daniel whispered softly, "It's all right, you're not alone." The child tried to speak, but only a weak sound came. Daniel noticed spilled food on the floor, stains on the chair, the kind no one had cleaned for days. With quiet care, he knelt down and began to clean. Each movement was slow and gentle, like he was not just wiping a floor, but touching a fragile soul. The child's breathing calmed, and for the first time a small smile flickered on its face, But then the air changed. A cold rush of energy filled the room. The glass door slid open with a heavy hiss. Daniel turned, heart jumping. Standing there was a tall figure dressed in robes that shimmered with jewels. Her skin glowed brighter than silver, her eyes sharp like knives. It was her, the owner of the tower, the richest alien on the planet. The billionaire mother of the child, her face twisted in shock, then anger. "How dare you touch my child?" she said, voice like thunder. Daniel froze, the cloth still in his hand. He wanted to explain, but the words stuck in his throat. The child raised a trembling hand toward her, trying to protect him. But she did not see. Her eyes burned only with suspicion. In that moment, Daniel felt small, smaller than ever. He was just a janitor, a human servant in a world that did not care. And yet, inside his chest, his heart beat strong. He had done nothing wrong. He had only cleaned away tears. But now, under the sharp gaze of the alien billionaire, he stood like a thief caught in a forbidden act. The silence grew heavy. Only the sound of the machines filled the air. Daniel slowly lowered his cloth, his voice shaking as he whispered, "Your child was crying." The alien billionaire stepped forward, her long shadow falling over him. Her jeweled hand reached for a small device at her belt, a signal for guards. Her voice cut through the room, filled with cold fire. "What are you doing with my child?" The air inside the glass chamber was heavy. The billionaire's eyes shone like cold fire as she stared at the human janitor standing beside her child. Her voice was sharp. "What are you doing with my child?" Daniel's throat felt dry, but he forced the words out. "Your child was crying, I only wanted to help." The alien billionaire, Lady Seraphis, did not believe him. To her, Humans were weak and selfish creatures, always seeking advantage, always. Looking for profit, her jeweled fingers hovered near the device on her belt, ready to summon guards. But before she pressed it, a small sound broke the silence. "Mother." "No," the child whispered. His weak arm reached toward Daniel, trembling but firm. "He helped me. No one else does." Lady Seraphis froze, shocked. Her child rarely spoke, too frail and too withdrawn. Now, for the first time in many moons, he spoke with strength, and it was for a human servant. Her mind raced, torn between anger and confusion. Why would her child trust this janitor when her own highly paid staff did not receive such affection? Slowly, she lowered her jeweled hand. Her voice softened but remained cold. "Very well, if my child speaks for you, I will not call the guards." But her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You will stay here, continue your work, but know this: every move you make will be watched." Daniel bowed his head slightly, hiding the relief in his chest. He did not want trouble. He only wanted to do the right thing. Yet he could feel the sharp eyes of Lady Seraphis piercing into his soul. He returned to his duties, quietly cleaning. But now the child's gaze followed him with something brighter than before: trust. From that day, Daniel was allowed inside the chamber at certain hours. The billionaire claimed it was coincidence, but secretly, she ordered her machines to record him. Hidden cameras tracked his every movement, searching for proof of deceit. But Daniel never sought gold, never touched what was not his. He only wiped dust, fixed spills, and when the child struggled to reach something, he bent down and offered gentle help. The child began to wait for him each evening, eyes glowing softly. Whenever Daniel entered, even a weak smile appeared. The mansion staff noticed, and they whispered in cold voices, "Strange, the human has caught the child's attention." Some were angry, others mocked. To them, Daniel was still only a janitor, a shadow in their perfect world. But trust is a seed, and in the silence of the mansion it began to grow. Daniel's kindness slowly changed the air inside the glass chamber. The child laughed once, a sound no one had heard for years. Lady Seraphis pretended not to notice, but in her private chamber she replayed the recording many times. Why did the child glow with happiness only near this human? Still, her suspicion never left. One evening, as Daniel polished the crystal floor, he heard something he was not meant to hear. Two alien servants whispered in the corridor outside, their voices sharp and cruel. "The child is weak, unfit to inherit. The council will never accept him. Soon Lady Seraphis will be forced to choose another heir, and when that happens, we must act quietly." Daniel froze, his mop pausing mid-swipe. The words burned in his ears. They spoke not only of doubt, but of a plan. Something dark, something dangerous for the child. His hands tightened on the handle of the mop. He wanted to rush out and confront them, but he stopped. If they knew he heard, his life would be in danger. That night, as he left the tower, the city lights felt colder than ever. He walked through the streets, his mind heavy. Should he warn Lady Seraphis? Would she even believe him? A human janitor? Or would she think he invented lies to gain her trust? The next evening, when he returned to his duties, Daniel stood quietly in the chamber. The child smiled weakly at him, unaware of the storm growing. Outside, Lady Seraphis entered, her eyes as sharp as ever. "You seem troubled," she said slowly, watching him. Daniel hesitated, his heart beating like a drum. Finally he spoke, his voice low but steady. "My lady, your child is in danger. There are whispers of betrayal among your own people." The words hung in the air like thunder. For a long moment she stared at him, then laughter escaped her lips, soft but cruel. "You humans are clever with your lies, always spinning tales to gain sympathy." She turned away, her jeweled robe flowing behind her. "You think you can win my trust with stories? You are nothing but a janitor. Do your work and leave." Daniel felt the sting of her words, but his heart would not let go of the truth. He knew what he heard. He knew danger was close, and though she did not believe him, He swore silently to himself that he would not allow harm to reach the child, not while he still breathed. That night, as the mansion lights dimmed, shadows moved in the distant halls. Silent figures walked where they should not walk. Their steps were slow, deliberate, filled with purpose. They were heading toward the glass chamber. And inside that chamber, Daniel stood alone, mop in hand, watching the shadows draw near. Cliffhanger. The janitor overheard a deadly secret in the mansion corridors. Someone wanted the child gone, and now they were coming. The mansion was silent, but silence can be dangerous. Daniel felt it in his bones, a cold tension crawling through the crystal halls. He stood near the child's chair, mop in hand, pretending to clean, but his eyes were fixed on the shadows. Beyond the glass walls, they moved slowly, too carefully, as if they wished to remain unseen. The child, weak but alert, noticed his stiff posture. "Why do you look afraid?" The boy asked softly, his glowing eyes searching Daniel's face. Daniel forced a small smile. "It's nothing, just shadows." But in his heart, he knew it was not nothing. The whispers he had overheard were real, and now those whispers had turned into footsteps. The door slid open with a quiet hiss. 2 alien servants stepped inside, their robes dark, their hands carrying small metallic devices that gleamed under the chamber lights. They bowed quickly toward the child, but their eyes were sharp and full of intent. Daniel's chest tightened, his instinct screaming. He had no weapon, no armor, only the mop in his hand and courage in his heart. "Leave us, human," one of them ordered coldly. "We will tend to the young master now." Daniel's hand tightened around the wooden handle of the mop. He shook his head slowly. "The child does not want you here," the servant sneered, stepping closer. "You are nothing, a janitor. You do not give orders in this house." The child tried to speak, his weak voice trembling. "Daniel, stay." That single word gave Daniel strength. He stepped between the child and the servants, blocking their path. His voice was low but steady. "If you wish to touch him, you must go through me." For a moment, the servants hesitated. They had expected fear, obedience, not defiance. Their eyes narrowed with anger, and one of them raised his device, a needle-like tool meant to silence quickly and quietly. Daniel's breath quickened, but he did not move aside. His mind raced. If he fell, the child would be helpless. The door behind them opened again. This time it was Lady Seraphis herself, her robes sparkling with jewels, her face filled with icy authority. The servants quickly bowed, hiding their devices behind their backs. "Forgive us, my lady, we only came to check on the boy," one lied smoothly. Her eyes narrowed, her gaze sliding from them to Daniel, who still stood protectively in front of the child. "What is happening here?" Her voice cut the air. Daniel's chest rose and fell as he spoke. "They came for your child. I told you there were whispers of betrayal." The servants bowed lower. "He lies, my lady. He twists words to make himself look important." "Lady." Seraphis studied their faces, then turned her eyes on Daniel. Her mind was a battlefield of doubt and suspicion. Could it be true? Could her own staff betray her? The child spoke again, his weak voice trembling but clear. "Mother, they frighten me." Those words pierced her harder than any blade. For years her child had spoken little, but now he confessed fear openly. Her eyes flashed with sudden anger, but not at Daniel. Instead, her gaze turned like fire toward the servants. "Leave my sight at once," she commanded, her voice thunderous. The servants bowed again, their faces pale, and retreated quickly. But as they left, Daniel caught the look in their eyes. Hatred, not fear. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. Lady Seraphis turned to Daniel, her sharp voice softened. "You speak of betrayal, yet I find no proof, only whispers." Daniel met her gaze, steady and calm. "Sometimes whispers are the beginning of storms, my lady." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her thoughts racing. She did not like being challenged by a human, but something about his courage unsettled her. He was not like the others, not greedy, not afraid. Later that night, as Daniel walked the halls alone, he felt the eyes of the mansion on him. Guards stared with suspicion, Servants whispered as he passed. Some called him foolish, others warned him quietly. "Be careful, human. You stand where you should not stand." But he could not walk away. Each time he thought of the child's glowing tears, his heart grew heavier with duty. In her private chamber, Lady Seraphis watched recordings of the night, the way Daniel had. Stood firm, the way her child had clung to him. Her mind struggled against pride. Was it possible that this human cared more for her child than her own people? Still, she could not admit it. Not yet. Her empire was built on strength and wealth, not trust in janitors. Meanwhile, the servants who had been dismissed gathered in a hidden corner of the mansion. Their voices were low but filled with venom. The human interferes, he grows too close. If the lady begins to trust him, our plans will fail. He must be removed quietly. And so the conspiracy deepened. Daniel sensed it each time he entered the chamber. Each time the guard's eyes lingered too long on him, he knew he had become a target. But he also knew one thing with certainty. If danger came again, he would not step aside. That night, as the city's twin moons rose above the glass towers, a storm of betrayal was already moving toward him, and deep in his heart, Daniel whispered a silent vow. "I will protect the boy no matter the cost." Cliffhanger. In the shadows of the mansion, knives of betrayal sharpened, and Daniel was now their first target. The mansion slept under the pale glow of the twin moons, but sleep could not reach. Daniel. He paced slowly inside the child's chamber, his mop leaning against the wall, his ears straining to catch the faintest sound. The boy rested in his floating chair, eyes half closed, breathing shallow, yet there was peace on his face when Daniel was near. Daniel's heart was restless. The whispers of betrayal still haunted him. He could feel danger crawling through the walls like hidden insects. Something was coming, and he knew it would not wait much longer. The door to the chamber hissed. Daniel turned sharply, gripping the mop handle as if it were a weapon. 3 dark figures slipped inside, their robes heavy, their eyes glowing faint red in the dim light. They carried weapons not meant for open battle but for silent kills, blades that shimmered with deadly energy. One of them pointed at the boy. "Take him. End this weakness." The voice was low and merciless. Daniel's body moved before his mind. He planted himself between the assassins and the child. His voice shook but did not break. "You will not touch him." The assassins laughed, cold and cruel. "You are a janitor with a stick," one hissed. "Step aside or be swept away like dirt." Daniel gripped the mop tighter, his knuckles white. He had no training, no power, only courage. But courage can be sharper than steel when fueled by love. The first assassin lunged. Blade flashing, Daniel swung the mop, blocking the strike with desperate force. Sparks leapt. The wooden handle cracked but held. Pain shot through his arms, yet he did not fall. He struck back, driving the mop's end into the assassin's chest, forcing him back a step. The second rushed forward, slashing low. Daniel twisted, barely avoiding the strike, his uniform tearing open. A hot line of pain burned across his side, but he ignored it. He shouted, "Stay back," as he swung wildly, forcing them to circle him. Behind him, the child cried out, "Daniel." That cry gave him strength. Every swing, every block, every desperate breath was no longer for himself, but for the fragile life behind him. The assassins pressed harder, 3 against 1. Daniel stumbled, blood dripping from his wound, his breath ragged. But each time they tried to break past him, he blocked. Each time they reached out for the child, he stood taller. He would not let them through, even if it cost his life. Suddenly, the air crackled. The boy's body glowed with strange light, his eyes blazing bright silver. Energy poured from him, shaking the chamber walls. Machines sparked, glass trembled, the very floor vibrated. The assassins froze, startled by the sudden surge of power. Daniel glanced back in awe. "Stay calm. You're stronger than them," he whispered. The child's cry became a scream, and a wave of energy burst outward. The assassins were thrown against the walls, their weapons clattering to the ground. Daniel collapsed to his knees. shielding the boy with his body as shards of crystal rained down. When the light faded, silence filled the chamber once more. The door burst open, and Lady Seraphis rushed in. Her jeweled eyes widened as she took in the scene. Assassins broken, machines sparking, her child glowing weakly and Daniel bleeding on the floor. For the first time, her cold mask cracked. She ran to her child, then froze as she saw the human shielding him with his battered body. Daniel coughed, struggling to breathe. His voice was weak but steady. "I kept him safe." The boy clung to Daniel's arm, whispering, "Don't leave me." Lady Seraphis knelt, her jeweled hands trembling. Her empire had taught her that humans were tools, servants, disposable. Yet here was one who bled not for himself but for her child. Her heart, wrapped in years of pride and ice, trembled with doubt. She turned her gaze to the assassins groaning on the ground, rage boiling in her veins. "Guards!" she roared, her voice echoing like thunder. Armored soldiers stormed the room, seizing the assassins, dragging them away. Her face hardened, but her eyes returned again and again to the human janitor who refused to let go of her son. "Why?" she whispered almost to herself. Her jeweled hand brushed Daniel's blood-stained uniform. "Why would you risk your life for my child?" Daniel tried to sit up, his face pale, his breath shallow. His answer was simple, spoken with all the strength left in him. "Because no one should be left alone." The words struck her deeper than any weapon. For the first time in years, she felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. The empire, the riches, the pride, they all seemed hollow against those simple words. Her gaze softened, though her voice still trembled with conflict. "You are only a janitor, and yet—" She could not finish the thought. The child's glowing hand clutched Daniel's tighter, refusing to let go, and Lady Seraphis knew then that her world was changing. A human had stepped into her life and nothing would ever be the same. Cliffhanger. As the chamber lay in ruins, Lady Seraphis whispered to herself, "Perhaps this human is the only one I can trust." The mansion was no longer the same after the attack. Walls still bore the scars of shattered glass and scorch. Marks painted the once perfect floor, but inside the ruined chamber something had quietly changed. The child, once silent and afraid, now looked at Daniel with eyes full of light. Daniel's wounds were deep, yet he refused to leave the boy's side. Even when healers insisted he rest, he sat close, his body weak, but his spirit strong. He would tell the boy simple stories, human, tales of rivers and forests far from alien cities. The child would listen, smiling faintly, his small hands clutching Daniel's sleeve as if afraid he might vanish. Lady Seraphis often entered silently, standing in the shadows. She watched the bond between human and child grow. Each laugh, each shared glance, each gentle word, they pierced her heart. For years she had given her son every machine, every luxury, but never warmth. Now a janitor had given him more than wealth could ever buy. At first she tried to tell herself it was foolish. "Humans are weak, they care only for themselves," she whispered at night. But her eyes betrayed her thoughts. She saw how her son's strength improved, how his hidden power became steadier. When Daniel encouraged him, the child was learning control, not through machines but through trust. One evening, as the moon shone silver over the tower, Lady Seraphis stepped inside the chamber. Daniel was teaching the boy how to hold a small cup without spilling. The boy's hands shook, but Daniel's voice was calm. "Steady, you can do this, don't rush." When the cup finally stayed upright, the boy's smile lit the room. Lady Seraphis felt something unfamiliar. Pride, not in wealth or empire, but in simple success. She stepped closer, her jeweled robes whispering on the floor. "You care for him as if he were your own," she said softly. Daniel turned, surprised by her gentle tone. He answered simply, "Because he deserves it." The words struck her harder than she expected. Her empire had taught her that worth was measured in power, but Daniel spoke as if worth was simply being alive. Days turned into weeks, and whispers spread outside the mansion walls. Alien rivals began to notice the strange closeness between the billionaire, her child, and a human janitor. At council gatherings, voices grew sharp. They say you allow a human servant to sit beside your heir. One leader sneered. Do you wish the Empire to laugh at you? Another mocked. Lady Seraphis kept her face cold, but their words cut deep. Back inside her mansion, she began to feel the weight of choice pressing down. Her advisors warned, remove the human, or risk everything you have built. But each time she thought of obeying, her mind returned to her son's glowing smile. She remembered the way Daniel had bled for him, and she remembered his words. No one should be left alone. Still, the storm outside grew louder. One night, Daniel overheard guards muttering as he passed. The council will not stand for this much longer. They will force her hand soon. He said nothing, but his heart tightened. He knew his presence had brought both healing and danger. Later, in the quiet of the chamber, Daniel spoke gently to Lady Seraphis. If my being here brings risk to you and your child, I will go. The boy gasped, gripping his arm. No, don't leave me. Lady Seraphis looked between them, her chest heavy with conflict. Her pride told her to let him leave, to protect her empire. But her heart, long buried under ice, whispered another answer. No, she said firmly, her jeweled eyes glowing with new resolve. You will stay. Daniel bowed his head, but relief flickered in his eyes. The boy smiled and leaned against him, and in that moment, Lady Seraphis allowed herself to sit nearby, not as a ruler, not as a billionaire, but as a mother. For the first time, she felt the warmth of family, though it was fragile and new, but peace is never safe for long. From the outer halls came the sound of urgent footsteps. An armored messenger knelt before Lady Seraphis, his voice sharp with warning. My lady, the council grows restless. They demand an answer. They will not allow this human's presence much longer. He handed her a sealed command, stamped with the mark of power. Either she removed the human, or the council would strip her of her fortune and her seat. The air grew heavy, silence filling the chamber. Daniel said nothing, though he knew what it meant. The boy's eyes widened with fear, clutching Daniel tighter. Lady Seraphis held the message in her hand, the weight of empire pressing against her heart. She stared at Daniel, then at her child. Torn between two worlds, her fingers crushed the seal. But her decision remained hidden. In her eyes burned a fire neither the council nor the empire had seen before. The choice before her was cruel, yet it would shape not only her family but the fate of her world. Cliffhanger. A warning had arrived. Remove the human or lose everything. And now Lady Seraphis had to choose. The sealed command from the council lay heavy in Lady Seraphis's hand. Its golden stamp shimmered with authority, yet it felt colder than ice. She could almost hear the voices of her rivals whispering in the dark halls of power. Remove the human or lose everything. Her empire had been built with steel and silence. She had crushed competitors, silenced critics, and bent the market to her will. But now, for the first time, she hesitated. Not because of fear for her throne, but because of two pairs of eyes. One was her son's, fragile, glowing, filled with trust. The other was Daniel's, steady, scarred, yet shining with a strange courage she could not explain. The child clung to Daniel's arm, whispering, "Mother, don't let them take him." Her heart twisted, but her pride fought back. "You don't understand," she said sharply, though her voice trembled. "If I defy them, I may lose everything." Daniel's voice was calm, almost too calm. "If my presence puts you in danger, I will leave." But even as he spoke, the boy shook his head, his small hands gripping tighter. "No, please don't leave me alone again." Lady Seraphis turned away, her jeweled robe sweeping across the floor. Inside, her mind raged like a storm. She had never been forced to choose between power and heart, but the council had cornered her, and every path seemed filled with ruin. The following day, the council summoned her. Inside the great chamber, tall figures in silver robes watched her like hawks, their voices cut like knives. "Your reputation is slipping, Seraphis. You allow a human servant to play the role of protector for your heir. This insult cannot continue." Lady Seraphis kept her face calm, but her fists were clenched under her robe. "What I allow in my house is my choice, Bob," she replied coldly. But the council leader leaned forward, his eyes glowing red. "Not when it affects the balance of our empire. Remove the human, or we will remove you." Whispers spread like fire across the chamber. Some agreed with the leader, others only watched in silence, but all of them were waiting to see if Seraphis would bend or break. Back in the mansion, Daniel felt the weight of those whispers long before Seraphis returned. Guards stared at him with open hostility. Servants muttered, "He has bewitched her, he will bring ruin." At night, he heard boots marching outside his small quarters, a warning that he was being watched. The boy remained his only comfort. Together they trained gently each evening, Daniel guiding him with simple words. Steady, breathe, focus. The boy's power, once wild and dangerous, now flowed like a calm river. Each success brought laughter, and each laugh was a shield against the fear pressing in from outside. One night, as Daniel left the chamber, 2 guards blocked his path. Their faces were cold, their hands resting on weapons. "You do not belong here," one hissed. "You are a danger to the lady, to the heir, to the empire itself." Daniel's hand tightened into a fist, but he forced his voice to remain calm. "I am no danger. I only wish to protect the boy," the guards sneered. "Then protect him by leaving, before you bring his death upon him." Daniel returned. To his room, his chest heavy, he sat in the dark, whispering to himself, "Maybe they are right, maybe staying will only bring harm." But then he remembered the boy's eyes, the boy's smile, and the way he had whispered, "Don't leave me." That memory alone kept him strong. Lady Seraphis returned late that night, her steps heavy, her face pale beneath her jeweled crown. She entered the chamber where her son and Daniel waited. For a long time she said nothing, only staring at the 2 of them. Finally she spoke, her voice breaking. "The council demands your removal, Daniel. They say I must choose between my empire and you." The boy cried out, "No, mother, please." Tears shimmered in his glowing eyes, his small body trembling. Daniel bowed his head, his voice quiet but firm. "Then the choice is clear, my lady. Let me go. Your empire is worth more than one janitor." But Lady Seraphis did not answer. Instead, she sank into her chair, covering her face with her jeweled hands. For the first time in her long life, she looked not like a ruler, but like a mother lost between duty and love. The chamber was silent, broken only by the boy's soft sobs. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering, "Be strong, little one." Yet his own heart ached with every word. Outside, the mansion shook with unrest. Protesters had gathered in the city streets, shouting for Seraphis to cast out the human. Messages poured in from rivals, mocking her weakness, predicting her downfall. The walls of power were closing in and time was running out. Finally, Seraphis lifted her head, her jeweled eyes burning with a strange fire. She looked at Daniel, then at her son, and whispered, "I will not obey them." The words hung in the air like lightning. Daniel's eyes widened. The boy gasped with hope, but Seraphis's voice grew stronger, fiercer. "If they want war, they will have it. I choose my son, and I choose the one who saved him." The chamber shook again, but this time it was not from protesters outside. It was the sound of heavy boots storming the mansion halls. The council had sent its enforcers ready to remove Daniel by force. Cliffhanger. The mansion doors crashed open and armored soldiers marched inside. Seraphis had made her choice, and now war was at her doorstep. The mansion doors thundered as armored soldiers stormed inside, their boots pounded like drums of war, their glowing spears raised high. They moved with ruthless precision, spreading through the halls like a flood. At their front marched the council's enforcers, faces hidden behind silver masks. Daniel stood before the child, a broken mop still clutched in his hand. His wounds from the last battle had barely healed, yet his body braced for another storm. The boy clung to his arm, trembling but refusing to let go. Lady Seraphis stood tall, jeweled robes sweeping across the marble floor, her eyes blazing with defiance. "You dare invade my house. Her voice thundered, echoing across the chamber. The lead enforcer stepped forward, his mask reflecting the chamber lights. The council. Has spoken, Seraphis. His voice rang cold. Remove the human or lose your empire. Seraphis raised her chin, her voice sharp as a blade. Then I lose the empire, but I will not lose my son. Gasps filled the chamber. Even the soldiers hesitated. No ruler had ever spoken against the council so openly. Daniel's heart pounded. He knew her words would change everything. The boy's eyes glowed brighter, his small hands trembling with power. The enforcer's spear pointed directly at Daniel. Then he dies now, the enforcer declared. The boy cried out, "No!" And his body erupted with silver light. A wave of energy burst through the chamber, sending soldiers crashing against the walls, weapons clattering across the floor. The child gasped, struggling to control the storm, but Daniel knelt beside him, his voice was calm, steady. Breathe. You're stronger than them, but don't let anger guide you. The boy focused on Daniel's words, his light steadied, becoming a shield that pushed the soldiers back without crushing them. For the first time, his power was not wild, and it was controlled. Shaped by love and trust, Lady Seraphis watched in awe, her pride and fear melting into something new. She had spent fortunes trying to control her son's gift with machines, but one human's kindness had done what wealth could not. Her voice rang out, powerful and proud. Behold, this is my heir, not weak, not broken, but stronger than all your schemes. The enforcers staggered to their feet, rage burning in their eyes. But before they could attack again, Seraphis stepped forward, her jeweled hands raised. You call me weak for keeping a human, but weakness is fearing love. Weakness is fearing truth. Her voice shook the air, her words piercing the silence of soldiers and servants alike. This man bled for my son, when even my own people turned knives against him. If you call that weakness, then perhaps your empire deserves to fall. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some soldiers lowered their weapons, shaken by her words. Others shouted for her arrest, but the boy's glowing shield held firm, protecting them from every strike. And in that light, Daniel stood tall, no longer just a janitor, but a guardian. At last, the enforcers retreated, dragging their wounded away. The council's message was clear. Seraphis had made herself their enemy, but the mansion, once filled with whispers of betrayal, now echoed with something else. Servants bowed silently. Guards looked with new respect, for they had seen a mother's defiance, a child's awakening, and a human's unbroken courage. That night, as the city lights flickered below the tower, Seraphis sat with Daniel and her son. Her jeweled crown lay forgotten on the table. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. I was the richest in the galaxy, yet I was poor. I built walls of gold, but I had no warmth inside them. She turned her gaze to Daniel. You gave my child what I could not with all my power, not with all my fortune. Daniel shook his head softly, his voice gentle. I gave nothing but kindness. Seraphis smiled faintly, a rare human smile on alien lips. And that is worth more than empires. The boy leaned against them both, his glowing eyes peaceful. For the first time in his life, he felt not like a burden, but like a son loved by two hearts. And in that moment, a family was born. Strange, fragile, but stronger than any council decree. The galaxy whispered of Seraphis's rebellion. Some mocked, others feared, but a few quietly admired. And rumors spread of a human janitor who stood against assassins, soldiers, and even an empire, not with weapons, but with heart. In the years to come, the child would grow, his power shaped by love. Seraphis would rebuild her house not on fear but on trust, and Daniel, once unseen and unvalued, would be remembered not as a servant, but as the guardian of the heir. The empire would tremble, the council would scheme, and new battles would rise. But the legacy of that night was clear. One human had taught an alien, empire, that the greatest power is not wealth, nor armies, nor crowns. It is the courage to care and the strength to stand for those who cannot. Closing line. Humanity proved its greatest weapon was never steel or fire, but the simple power of love.